Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he checked the mining equipment one more time. The heat on Kepler 442b was always bad during the day cycle, but today felt worse than usual. He had been working on this colony world for 8 months now, and every day was the same routine. Wake up, check the machines, supervise the mining operations, and try not to think about how far he was from Earth. The mining facility was nothing fancy. It was a collection of prefab buildings and heavy machinery, designed to extract rare minerals from the planet's crust. About 500 humans lived and worked here, all hoping to make enough money to return home someday. Jake was one of them, though he had to admit the work was starting to grow on him. There was something satisfying about building something new on an alien world. He was adjusting a drill setting when the alarm started blaring. The sound was so loud and unexpected that Jake dropped his tools and covered his ears. Around him, other workers stopped what they were doing and looked up at the sky. That's when Jake saw them. Ships. Massive ships that looked like they were made of crystal and metal combined. They were descending through the atmosphere, dozens of them moving in perfect formation. The largest one was easily the size of a small city. Jake had never seen anything like it, and he had worked on 3 different colony worlds. His communicator crackled to life. It was Helen Martinez, his supervisor. Her voice was tight with barely controlled panic. All workers report to the main building immediately. This is not a drill. I repeat, this is not a drill. Jake ran toward the main building along with everyone else. His mind raced with questions. Were these ships friendly? Were they even human? Earth had made contact with a few alien species, but none of them had technology this advanced. These ships moved through the air like they were ignoring the laws of physics. Inside the main building, chaos ruled. Workers were shouting, asking questions that nobody could answer. Helen stood on a raised platform trying to get everyone's attention. She was a tough woman in her 50s, who had worked in space for most of her adult life. Jake had never seen her look scared before, but she looked scared now. "Listen up," Helen shouted over the noise. "We're getting reports from orbit. These ships belong to something called the Velixian Empire. They're not human. Command is trying to establish communication, but so far they haven't responded to our hails. Stay calm, stay together, and do not do anything stupid. If they're hostile, running won't help. If they're peaceful, we don't want to give them a reason to change their minds." Jake found a spot near a window where he could see outside. The ships had landed in a wide circle around the colony. Ramps extended from their sides and figures began to emerge. Even from a distance, Jake could tell they weren't human. They were tall, maybe 7 feet, and their skin seemed to shimmer in the sunlight. They moved with purpose, like soldiers who had done this 1,000 times before. Within an hour, the aliens had established a perimeter around the entire colony. Their soldiers, if that's what they were, carried weapons that hummed with energy. They didn't point them at anyone, but the message was clear. The colony was now under their control. Helen gathered all the workers in the main plaza. Jake stood in a crowd of about 200 people, all of them scared and confused. The alien soldiers formed lines on either side of them, their faces impossible to read. They wore armor that seemed to shift and flow like liquid metal. Their eyes were large and luminous, colored in shades Jake didn't have names for. One of the aliens stepped forward and spoke. To Jake's surprise, the words came out in perfect English. "You will remain calm. You will be processed. Resistance will not be tolerated." The voice was neither male nor female, and it had a strange musical quality that made the threat somehow worse. Processing began immediately. The aliens moved down the lines of humans, scanning each person with handheld devices that projected beams of light. Most of the workers kept their heads down, too terrified to do anything else. Jake understood the feeling. These beings had technology that made humanity look like children playing with sticks. But Jake couldn't help himself. He was scared, yes, but he was also curious. Who were these aliens? Where did they come from? What did they want with a small mining colony in the middle of nowhere? He watched as they worked, noting how efficient they were, how organized. This wasn't an invasion force. This was an occupation force. They had done this before. That's when everything changed. A new ship descended from the sky, smaller than the others, but somehow more impressive. It was sleek and elegant, decorated with symbols that might have been writing or art. It landed in the center of the plaza, and the alien soldiers immediately stood at attention. The ramp extended, and she emerged. Jake had never believed in love at first sight, and this wasn't that. But there was something about her that demanded attention. She was clearly important. Her armor was more elaborate than the soldiers, with patterns that seemed to glow from within. Her hair, if it could be called hair, moved like it was underwater, flowing in colors that shifted between silver and deep blue. She was beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with human standards of beauty. She was beautiful in the way a storm was beautiful, powerful and dangerous and impossible to ignore. Princess Kalara, though Jake didn't know her name yet, walked along the lines of humans with her guards following close behind. She studied each person with an intensity that made Jake's skin prickle. He could see her lips moving, speaking to her guards in a language that sounded like music and mathematics had a child together. She moved down the line, getting closer to where Jake stood. He knew he should look down like everyone else. He knew he should avoid drawing attention, but he couldn't. There was something about her that fascinated him. The way she moved, the way she observed everything with such focus. She wasn't just going through the motions. She was actually interested in what she was seeing. When Princess Kalara reached Jake's section of the line, she stopped. Her eyes, which were the color of deep space, locked onto his. Jake felt like she was looking into him, reading everything he was and everything he had ever been. The moment stretched out, seconds feeling like hours. He saw something change in her expression. Surprise, maybe, or recognition, as if she had found something she hadn't expected to find. She turned sharply to her guards and spoke in her native language. The words were incomprehensible to Jake, but the tone was clear. She was giving an order. Then she switched to English, and Jake's world tilted on its axis. He belongs to me now. She pointed directly at him. Jake felt hands grip his arms before he could react. Two of the alien guards pulled him out of the line. Helen stepped forward, her hands raised in a gesture of peace. "Wait," Helen said, her voice shaking but determined. "Please, he's just a mining engineer. He's not anyone important. He's just a kid trying to make a living." Princess Kalara looked at Helen with an expression that wasn't cruel but wasn't kind either. It was the look of someone who didn't need to explain themselves to lesser beings. "His importance is not for you to determine. He has been claimed under royal law. No harm will come to him unless he gives us reason." Jake wanted to say something, to protest or ask questions or at least say goodbye to his co-workers, but the guards were already moving him toward the royal ship. He looked back at the crowd of humans, seeing his own fear reflected in their faces. But he also saw relief. Relief that it was him and not them. He couldn't blame them for that. The inside of the royal ship was beyond anything Jake had imagined. The walls glowed with soft light that seemed to come from everywhere and nowhere. The floors were smooth and warm under his feet. The air smelled like ozone and something sweet he couldn't identify. Everything was designed with curves and flowing lines. Nothing harsh or angular. They brought him to a room with seats that looked like they grew out of the floor. Princess Kalara sat across from him, her guards positioned at the exits. She studied him in silence for a long moment, and Jake felt like a specimen under a microscope. Finally, she spoke. "What is your name, human?" Jake swallowed hard. His throat was dry, but he managed to answer. "Jake Morrison, Your Highness." He wasn't sure if that was the right way to address her, but it seemed safer to be too respectful than not respectful enough. "You may call me Kalara when we are alone," she said, which surprised him more than anything else that had happened. "Tell me, Jake Morrison, do you know why I selected you?" Jake shook his head. "No, ma'am. I really don't. I'm nobody special. Just a worker." A slight smile crossed her face, and Jake realized she had expressions he could read. That was somehow comforting. "You looked at me," she said simply. "Not with fear, though I could see you were afraid. Not with hatred, though you have reason to hate what we represent. You looked at me with curiosity. Do you know how rare that is?" Jake didn't know what to say to that, so he said nothing. Kalara continued. "We have visited hundreds of worlds. We have encountered dozens of species. Most look at us with fear or hatred or both. They see conquerors. They see the end of their freedom. But you looked at me like you were trying to understand. Like you wanted to know who I was, not just what I was. That interests me." "I don't understand," Jake said honestly. "What does that mean for me?" "It means your life has changed, Jake Morrison." Jake stared at Princess Kalara, trying to process what she had just told him. Claimed. The word echoed in his mind. He had heard of slavery in history books, but this seemed different somehow. Or maybe it wasn't different at all. Maybe it was just slavery with a fancy name, and if I refuse? Jake asked. His voice came out steadier than he felt. He knew it was probably a stupid question, but he needed to know what his options were, if he had any options at all. Kaylara tilted her head slightly, studying him with those impossible eyes. Then you return to the processing facilities with the others. I select someone else. Your people will be integrated into the Empire as laborers and colonists, but you specifically will have lost an opportunity that most beings would kill for. An opportunity, Jake repeated. The word tasted bitter. To serve you. To see the galaxy, Kaylara corrected. To learn about civilizations that your species doesn't even know exist. To walk on worlds that humans will not reach for 1,000 years. To understand the Velixian Empire from the inside. Is that not valuable to you? Jake wanted to argue. He wanted to tell her that freedom was more valuable than any opportunity. But the truth was more complicated. He had joined the colony mission because he wanted adventure. He wanted to see things that others never would, and now he was being offered exactly that, just not in the way he had imagined. What would I have to do? He asked carefully. Learn our language. Learn our customs. Speak honestly when I ask for your opinion. Show me how humans think and solve problems. Your species is new to us. We know little about you beyond basic biology and technology assessments. I want to understand what makes you survive and adapt so well. Why? Jake asked. Why do you care about understanding humans? Kaylara leaned back in her seat. The chair seemed to adjust to her movement, flowing like liquid. Because understanding is power. The Empire expands through strength, yes, but also through knowledge. Every species has something unique about them. Humans have survived on a world that tried very hard to kill you. You have thrived in conditions that would destroy weaker beings. You fight amongst yourselves constantly, yet you also cooperate in ways that seem contradictory. That interests me. Jake thought about her words. She wasn't wrong about humanity. Humans were survivors. They were also stubborn, curious, and often too dumb to know when they should quit. Maybe those traits were worth studying. If I agree, Jake said slowly. Can you promise that my people, the workers on this colony, will be treated fairly? I cannot make promises about things outside my direct control, Kaylara said. But I can tell you that claimed individuals often become advocates for their species. If you prove yourself valuable, if you show me that humans have worth beyond labor, that will influence how the Empire views your people. Is that not reason enough to accept? It was manipulation. Jake knew that, but it was also the truth. If he could somehow make the Velixians see humans as more than just workers, that could help everyone back on the colony. It could help everyone on Earth. Okay, Jake said. I accept. But I want your word that you'll listen to what I have to say, even if you don't like it, even if it challenges your beliefs. For the first time, Kaylara smiled fully. It transformed her face into something almost warm. You have my word, Jake Morrison. I expect you to challenge me. That is exactly why I chose you. The ship lifted off shortly after, leaving Kepler 442b behind. Jake watched through a viewport as the planet grew smaller and smaller. Somewhere down there, Helen and the other workers were probably wondering what would happen to him. He wondered the same thing. The journey to the Velixian homeworld would take 3 weeks, Kaylara explained. The ship would travel through something called a phase corridor, which Jake understood was similar to faster-than-light travel, but different in ways he couldn't quite grasp. Physics had never been his strong subject. They gave him quarters that were bigger than his entire apartment back on Earth. The room had a bed that adjusted to his body, a bathroom with a shower that used some kind of sonic waves instead of water, and a window that showed the stars streaming past. Everything was controlled by touch panels that lit up when he approached them. It took him an hour just to figure out how to dim the lights. A guard brought him what they called a language integration device. It looked like a small metal disc. When Jake held it, the guard pressed it against his temple. There was a brief moment of pressure. Then the disc seemed to melt into his skin. Jake yelped and jumped back, but the guard just made a gesture that he interpreted as calm down. It will help you learn Velixian, the guard said. The voice was deep and seemed to come from everywhere at once. The device stimulates language centers in your brain. You will begin understanding our speech within days. Full fluency will take longer. Jake touched his temple where the device had been. He couldn't feel anything there, but he swore he could hear a faint humming in his skull. Does it hurt? Some species experience discomfort. Humans should adapt well. Your brains are flexible. After the guard left, Jake sat on the bed and tried to process everything. 24 hours ago, he had been a simple mining engineer. Now he was on an alien ship, traveling to an alien world with a device in his brain that was teaching him an alien language. His life had become science fiction. Kylara visited him every day during the journey. Sometimes she came alone, sometimes with advisors who observed Jake like he was an interesting insect. She asked him endless questions about Earth, about human history, about how humans organize themselves. "Your planet has over 200 separate governments," she said one day, her tone suggesting she found this absurd. "How do you accomplish anything? How do you make decisions that affect your whole species?" "We don't usually," Jake admitted. "We argue and fight and compete. But sometimes when we face a threat big enough, we work together. It's messy, but it works." "The Empire's not messy," Kylara said. "We have one government, one military, one purpose. Every being knows their place and their duty. That is why we are strong." "That's why you're powerful," Jake corrected. "I'm not sure it's the same as strong." She looked at him sharply. "Explain the difference." Jake thought carefully before answering. "Power is about what you can force others to do. Strength is about what you can endure and still keep going. Humans have been weak by a lot of measures throughout our history. We didn't have the best technology or the biggest armies. But we kept going. We adapted. We survived. That's a different kind of strength." Kylara was silent for a long moment. "You argue well, Jake Morrison. This is good. I grow tired of people who simply agree with everything I say." As the days passed, Jake learned more about the Velixian Empire. They had existed for over 3,000 years, expanding slowly but steadily across their region of space. They saw themselves as bringing order to chaos, civilization to barbarism. Every world they conquered was integrated into the empire, its resources managed, its people assigned roles based on capability assessments. "What happens to species that resist?" Jake asked one day. "They are given a choice," Kylara said. "Submit or be isolated. We do not exterminate resistant species. That would be wasteful. But we also do not tolerate active opposition. Worlds that refuse to join the Empire are quarantined. They are not allowed to spread beyond their own systems. Eventually they submit or they stagnate. That's still conquest," Jake said. "You're just giving people the choice between joining you or being left alone to die slowly." "Yes," Kylara agreed. "But we do not apologize for bringing order. The galaxy is a dangerous place, Jake Morrison. Species that cannot adapt do not survive. The Empire ensures survival. Is that not better than extinction?" Jake didn't have a good answer for that. She wasn't wrong exactly, but she wasn't right either. There had to be something between ruthless conquest and complete chaos. On the 18th day of the journey, Kylara brought Jake to the observation deck. The view was breathtaking. They were passing through a nebula, and colors Jake didn't have names for swirled outside the ship. It looked like someone had spilled paint across the universe. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Kylara said. She stood beside him close enough that Jake could feel the warmth radiating from her armor. "Yeah," Jake said. "It really is." "I wanted to show you this," Kylara said, "because I want you to understand something. The Empire has allowed me to see 1,000 beautiful things like this. We have cataloged wonders that most species never dream of. We have preserved dying worlds and saved failing civilizations. We are not monsters, Jake Morrison. We are not evil. We are simply what works." "But you take away choice," Jake said quietly. "You decide what's best for everyone else." "Someone has to," Kylara replied. "The alternative is chaos. I have seen worlds torn apart by endless wars between their own people. I have seen species destroy themselves through greed and short-sightedness. The Empire prevents that. We impose order. We ensure survival. Is that not worth the cost?" Jake looked at her, really looked at her. She believed what she was saying. This wasn't just propaganda or justification. She genuinely thought the Empire was making the galaxy better. "Maybe," Jake said. "But who watches the watchers? Who makes sure the Empire doesn't become the very thing it claims to prevent?" Kylara smiled sadly. "That Jake Morrison." The descent to Valixar Prime was unlike anything Jake had experienced. The ship glided through the atmosphere without any turbulence, moving between the floating cities with ease. Up close, the structures were even more impressive. Each city was a work of art, with towers that spiraled into the clouds and gardens that hung suspended in the air. Jake pressed his face against the viewport like a child. trying to take in everything at once. He saw Velixians moving through the streets on platforms that flew without any visible means of propulsion. He saw markets that seemed to sell goods from 1,000 different worlds. He saw monuments that must have been hundreds of feet tall, carved from single pieces of crystal. How? Jake asked, his voice barely above a whisper. How is any of this possible? Gravity manipulation, Kalara said, standing beside him. We learned to control gravitational fields 3,000 years ago. Once you master gravity, the sky is no longer a limit. Everything you see here was built by my ancestors over countless generations. This is what the Empire can accomplish when all resources are directed toward a single vision. The ship landed on the largest floating city, a place called Throne City according to the displays. As the ramp extended, Jake felt his stomach clench with nervousness. He was about to step onto an alien world, into the heart of an empire that spanned dozens of solar systems. He was just a human, just a mining engineer from Earth. He didn't belong here. Kalara seemed to sense his hesitation. Walk beside me, she said. Not behind, not in front, beside. You are my claimed companion, which means you have status here. Act like you belong, and most will assume you do. Jake nodded and followed her down the ramp. The moment his feet touched the ground, he felt the difference. The gravity was slightly lighter than Earth standard, making each step feel a bit bouncy. The air smelled sweet and clean, with hints of flowers he had never encountered. The temperature was perfect, not too hot or cold. But what really struck him were the stairs. Dozens of Velixians had gathered to watch the princess return. When they saw Jake walking beside her, confusion and curiosity rippled through the crowd. Some pointed. Others leaned in to whisper to their companions. Jake heard words he didn't understand, but the language device in his head was starting to work. He caught fragments. Human. Claimed. Unusual. Kalara ignored them all and walked with purpose toward a massive structure at the center of the city. The Imperial Palace, Jake assumed. It was bigger than any building he had ever seen, with walls that seemed to shift colors in the sunlight. Guards lined the pathway, each wearing armor similar to Kalara's but without the elaborate decorations. They snapped to attention as the princess passed. Inside the palace, the opulence increased tenfold. The floors were made of some material that looked like polished starlight. The walls displayed scenes that moved and changed, showing what Jake assumed were important moments in Velixian history. Servants moved through the hallways, carrying items and performing tasks with quiet efficiency. Other nobles began to appear, drawn by news of the princess's return. They were dressed in flowing robes and elaborate armor, each outfit seemingly designed to showcase wealth and status. When they saw Jake, their reactions ranged from amusement to disgust. One noble, a tall male with skin that sparkled like diamonds, actually laughed out loud. A human, the noble said in accented English. You brought back a human, princess. What's next? Will you claim a pet from the insect worlds? Kailara's expression didn't change, but Jake felt the temperature around them drop several degrees. Lord Vextron, she said coolly, when you can claim anything at all, you may judge my choices. Until then, I suggest you focus on your own mediocrity. Lord Vextron's face darkened, but he bowed stiffly and moved away. Jake realized he had just witnessed court politics in action. Kailara had power here, but she also had enemies, and now he was caught in the middle of it. They continued through the palace until they reached a massive set of doors. 2 guards stood on either side, each carrying weapons that hummed with barely contained energy. The doors opened silently, revealing a throne room that took Jake's breath away. The room was enormous, with a ceiling so high that clouds formed near the top. Light streamed in through windows that were actually open to the sky, held in place by what must have been force fields. At the far end of the room sat the throne, and on the throne sat the Emperor. Lord Thaxor was everything an emperor should be. He was taller than Kalara, with armor that seemed to be made of solidified lightning. His face was ageless, neither young nor old, and his eyes held the weight of centuries. When he looked at Jake, the human felt like he was being measured and found lacking. Father, Kalara said, bowing deeply. Jake quickly copied her, hoping he was doing it right. Daughter, Thaxor replied. His voice was deep and resonant, filling the entire throne room. You have returned. And you brought a guest. I exercised my right of claiming, Kalara said, straightening. This is Jake Morrison, a human from the colony world we just integrated. I believe he has potential. Potential for what? Thaxor asked. His eyes never left Jake, and the human fought the urge to fidget, to show us perspectives we lack, to challenge our assumptions, to remind us of what we may have forgotten in our pursuit of order. Several nobles who had gathered in the throne room made sounds of disbelief. One of them, a female with silver skin and golden eyes, stepped forward. "Your Majesty," she said, bowing to the Emperor. "With respect to the princess, humans are barely more advanced than primitives. They have not even achieved faster than light travel on their own. What could this creature possibly teach us?" Thaxor held up a hand, silencing her. "The princess has made her claim according to tradition." Jake Morrison stepped forward. Jake's legs felt like water, but he managed to walk closer to the throne. He stopped what he hoped was a respectful distance away and tried to stand up straight. "Do you understand what it means that my daughter has claimed you?" Thaxor asked. "Yes, Your Majesty," Jake said, his voice steadier than he felt. "It means I serve her. It means I represent my species in this court. It's both an honor and a responsibility." "And do you fear us?" Jake thought about lying, but something told him that would be a mistake. "Yes, sir. I'd be stupid not to. Your technology is centuries beyond ours. Your military could crush humanity without breaking a sweat. But I'm also curious about you. I want to learn. I'm willing to try." To Jake's surprise, Thaxor laughed. The sound was like thunder rolling across mountains. "Honesty. How refreshing. Most beings grovel and flatter when brought before me. You admit your fear and pair it with curiosity. Perhaps my daughter's judgment is not as flawed as some believe." The Emperor stood from his throne, and Jake realized the being was at least 8 feet tall. Thaxor walked down the steps until he stood directly in front of Jake. The human had to crane his neck to look up at him. "I will allow this," Thaxor said. "But understand, human, you are under scrutiny. You represent not just yourself, but your entire species. If you fail, if you prove to be worthless or disruptive, it will reflect poorly on all humans. The Empire's opinion of your people will be shaped by your actions here. Do you understand the weight of that?" "I understand," Jake said, "and I'll do my best not to screw it up." Several nobles gasped at his casual language. Thaxor's eyes widened slightly, then he laughed again. "You are either very brave or very foolish, Jake Morrison. Time will tell which. You may remain in the palace as my daughter's companion. Guard." A soldier stepped forward. "Your Majesty, assign quarters for the human. See that he is provided with appropriate clothing and access to the educational systems. He will need to learn our ways quickly." The audience was over. Kalara bowed again, and Jake copied her. As they left the throne room, Jake could hear the nobles beginning to whisper furiously among themselves. He had just become the most controversial figure in the imperial palace, and he had been here less than an hour. Kalara led him through more hallways until they reached what would be his quarters. The room was larger than his family's entire house back on Earth. It had a bedroom, a living area, a bathroom that looked like it belonged in a spa, and a balcony that overlooked the floating city. "You did well in there," Kalara said. "Most beings cannot stand in my father's presence without trembling." "I was trembling," Jake admitted. "I was just trying really hard not to show it." She smiled at that. "Honest again? Good. You will need that honesty in the days to come. The court is filled with beings who will try to manipulate you, test you, or destroy you. Trust no one except me, and even then question everything I tell you." "That's reassuring," Jake said dryly. "I am not here to reassure you. I am here to prepare you. Tomorrow you begin your education. You will learn our language, our history, our customs, and our laws. You will also begin attending court functions with me. Some will accept you. Most will not. But you will adapt. Humans are good at that, are they not?" "We try," Jake said. After Kalara left, Jake stood on the balcony and looked out at the alien city. Lights were beginning to come on as the sun set, and the view was breathtaking. He could see thousands of Velixians going about their lives, completely unaware that a human was now living among them. Jake thought about Earth, about his family. 2 months passed in a blur of lessons and court appearances. Jake learned to speak basic Velixian, though his accent made instructor Kelvin wince. He learned the complex hierarchy of the imperial court, memorizing which nobles held real power and which only pretended to. He learned to walk through the palace without drawing too much attention, though that was becoming increasingly difficult. The problem was that he was becoming famous, or perhaps infamous was the better word. The human who walked beside Princess Kalara The primitive who somehow earned the favor of a royal. Nobles whispered about him in hallways. Servants stared when they thought he wasn't looking. And through it all, Jake tried to keep his head down and learn everything he could. But not everyone was content to simply watch and whisper. Lord Vraxis was a high-ranking military commander, a veteran of dozens of campaigns across the Empire. He was old even by Velixian standards, with scars that marked his armor and a reputation for ruthlessness. From the first moment he saw Jake, his contempt was obvious. A pet human, Vraxis had said during one council meeting, loud enough for everyone to hear. Next, the princess will bring in creatures from the beast worlds to advise us on military strategy. Kalara had responded with icy politeness, but Jake could see the tension in her shoulders. Vraxis wasn't just insulting Jake. He was questioning her judgment, her fitness to someday rule. And in the Imperial Court, that was a dangerous game to play. The confrontation came during a full council assembly. Jake had been attending these meetings for weeks now, always sitting quietly in the corner, observing and learning. Today's meeting was focused on resource allocation across the Empire. Boring stuff mostly, until Vraxis stood and demanded the floor. "Your Majesty," Vraxis said, bowing to Emperor Thaxor, "I must address an issue that has been troubling many of us. The princess's human companion has now been with us for 2 months. In that time, what has he accomplished? What value has he brought to this court?" The room fell silent. Every eye turned to look at Jake, who felt his stomach drop. This was it. This was the challenge he had known was coming. Kalara stood smoothly. "Jake serves as my cultural advisor. His insights into human thinking have already proven valuable in understanding how to better integrate their species into the Empire." "Insights," Vraxis repeated, making the word sound like an insult. "Forgive me, Princess, but I have seen no evidence of these insights. I have seen only a primitive who sits in corners and observes his betters. If humans are as valuable as you claim, let him prove it." "What exactly are you suggesting, Lord Vraxis?" Emperor Thaxor asked. His voice was calm, but Jake had learned to read the warning in that calmness. "A test," Vraxis said. "A practical demonstration of human intelligence and problem-solving ability. If this Jake Morrison can prove that his species possesses capabilities worthy of our respect, then I will cease my objections. But if he fails, then he should be returned to his colony world, and we should reconsider our integration strategy for all humans." The challenge was clever, Jake had to admit. Vraxis had framed it as being about humans in general, not just about Jake specifically. If Jake failed, it wouldn't just be his reputation on the line. It would affect how the Empire treated every human in their territory. "Very well," Thaxor said. "Princess Kalara, do you accept this challenge on behalf of your companion?" Kalara looked at Jake. Her expression was calm, but her eyes asked a silent question. "Are you ready for this?" Jake gave a tiny nod. He didn't have a choice. If he backed down now, he would confirm everything the nobles believed about humans. "We accept," Kalara said. Vraxis smiled, and it wasn't a pleasant expression. "Excellent. The problem is this. Our mining operation on Epsilon Draconis has been experiencing catastrophic equipment failures. Productivity has dropped 40% over the last standard cycle. Our best engineers have been unable to determine the root cause. The system is highly complex, with redundancies built upon redundancies. If humans are as adaptable and clever as the princess claims, then Jake Morrison should be able to identify the problem where our experts have failed." Jake felt the weight of the challenge settle on his shoulders. This wasn't just difficult. This was designed to be impossible. Vraxis had chosen a problem that their best minds couldn't solve and expected a human with no formal engineering training beyond basic mining operations to fix it. "How long do I have?" Jake asked. His voice sounded steadier than he felt. 3 days, Vraxis said. "Surely that is sufficient for someone with such valuable insights." 3 days. Jake had 3 days to solve a problem that trained Velixian engineers hadn't solved in months. Great, just great. They gave him access to the data, and what he saw made his head spin. The Velixian mining system on Epsilon Draconis was beyond anything he had imagined. It wasn't just automated. It was intelligent, with AI systems managing every aspect of the operation. Thousands of machines worked in perfect coordination, extracting minerals from deep underground and processing them on site. Or at least, they were supposed to work in perfect coordination. Instead, the data showed cascade failures rippling through the system. One sensor would report an anomaly, triggering safety protocols. Those protocols would activate redundant systems, which would then trigger more safety protocols. The whole thing was eating itself alive, shutting down sections of the operation for no apparent reason. Jake spent the first day just trying to understand the system's architecture. Kilara visited him in the evening, finding him surrounded by holographic displays showing mining data. "How is it going?" she asked. "It's going," Jake said, rubbing his tired eyes. "I think I'm starting to see patterns, but this system is incredibly complex. Everything is connected to everything else. That is the Velixian way," Kilara said. "Efficiency through integration. Every system supports every other system. Maybe that's the problem," Jake muttered, more to himself than to her. The second day, Jake dove deeper into the data. He traced the cascade failures back to their origins, trying to find the first domino that started each collapse. The language device in his head throbbed with strain as he processed technical terms in Velixian. His eyes burned from staring at displays for hours on end. He barely ate. He didn't sleep. Instructor Kelvin stopped by to check on him and left shaking his head, muttering about foolish humans who didn't know when they were beaten. But Jake wasn't ready to give up. There was something there, something he could almost see. The Velixian engineers were brilliant, but they were also trapped by their own assumptions. They kept trying to fix the system by adding more complexity, more redundancies, more safeguards. What if that was exactly the wrong approach? On the morning of the third day, Jake finally saw it. The problem wasn't any single component. The problem was that there were too many components all trying to compensate for each other. When one sensor gave a false reading, which happened occasionally, the system's redundancies kicked in. But those redundancies were so tightly integrated that they actually amplified the error instead of correcting it. The more they tried to make the system foolproof, the more ways they created for it to fail. Jake spent the rest of the day preparing his presentation. He simplified the data into formats that would make sense to people who weren't engineers. He created visual aids showing the cascade effects. He practiced his explanation in Velixian until the words came smoothly. That evening, the full council assembled to hear his findings. Jake walked into the chamber feeling like he was heading to his own execution. Vraxis sat in the front row looking smug and confident. Other nobles watched with barely concealed curiosity or contempt. Kilara stood beside her father's throne, her expression carefully neutral. But Jake could see the tension in her posture. She had put her reputation on the line for him. If he failed, she failed with him. Jake took a deep breath and began. "Thank you for this opportunity to address the council," he said in careful Velixian. "I have reviewed the data from Epsilon Draconis, and I believe I have identified the core problem." He activated the holographic display, showing the cascade failures in visual form. "The issue is not with any specific component. The issue is systemic complexity. You have built redundancies upon redundancies, creating a network so interconnected that errors propagate instead of being contained." Vraxis leaned forward. "Are you suggesting that our engineering is flawed?" "I'm suggesting that it's too good," Jake said. "You've optimized for maximum theoretical efficiency, but you've created a system that's fragile because everything depends on everything else. When one sensor gives a false reading, the redundant systems try to compensate. But because they're all monitoring each other, they amplify the error instead of correcting it." He showed them specific examples, tracing the cascade failures through the system. "Each time this happens, your engineers add more safeguards. But that just makes the problem worse because now there are more systems that can trigger false alarms." "And your solution?" Emperor Thaxer asked. Jake pulled up his proposed changes. "Disconnect the auxiliary monitoring systems from the primary operations. Let each mining unit function independently with basic oversight. You'll lose some theoretical efficiency because the units won't be perfectly coordinated, but your actual productivity will increase because..." After the trial, Jake's status in the Imperial Court changed dramatically. Nobles who had dismissed him before now sought his opinion on various matters. Engineers consulted him when they encountered unusual problems. Even Vraxis, though still hostile, treated him with a grudging respect that bordered on professional courtesy. Jake found himself becoming a bridge between human thinking and Velixian logic. When the Empire struggled to understand why a newly conquered species resisted integration, Jake helped explain cultural factors the Velixians had overlooked. When resource allocation seemed optimal on paper but failed in practice, Jake pointed out the human element that the calculations missed. He was making a difference. He was earning his place. But as the months passed, he also began to see things he wished he could unsee. The Empire was efficient, but it was also ruthless. Jake sat in council meetings where they discussed conquered worlds with the same tone someone might use to discuss inventory management. Species were categorized by their usefulness. Resistance was met with overwhelming force. And through it all, the Velixians genuinely believed they were helping the galaxy by bringing order to chaos. 6 months after arriving on Valixar Prime, Jake received his first communication from Earth. It was a message that had been screened and approved by Imperial censors, but it was still from home. His sister Amy had written, telling him that news of his situation had reached Earth. Some saw him as a hero who was representing humanity at the highest levels. Others saw him as a collaborator who had abandoned his own kind. Jake read the message 3 times, feeling the weight of her words. What was he? A representative or a traitor? An advocate or a tool? He honestly didn't know anymore. That evening, Kaylara invited him to her private observatory. It was a place they had visited several times over the months. A glass dome at the top of the palace that offered views of the stars. It had become their refuge, a place where they could talk honestly without the weight of court politics pressing down on them. You seem troubled, Kaylara observed as they stood looking out at the cosmos. I got a message from my sister, Jake said. From Earth. It made me think about things I've been trying not to think about. Tell me. Jake turned to face her. Over the months he had learned to read Velixian expressions. The slight tilt of her head meant she was genuinely interested. The way her eyes softened meant she cared about his answer. They had become friends, as strange as that seemed. A human and an alien princess finding common ground in a universe that seemed designed to keep them apart. What happens to Earth? Jake asked. What happens to all the human colonies? I've been here for 6 months helping you understand my species better. But I've also seen how the Empire operates. You absorb worlds. You integrate them into your system. You take away their choice in the name of order and efficiency. Kaylara was quiet for a long moment. Yes, she finally said. That is what we do. It is what we have always done. And if we resist, if humans want to remain independent, then you will be given the same choice as every other species. Join the Empire and benefit from our protection and resources, or refuse and be quarantined to your own systems, cut off from the wider galaxy until you eventually submit or collapse. Jake felt anger rising in his chest. That's not a choice. That's a threat. It is reality, Kaylara said, her voice sad but firm. The galaxy is not kind to weak species, Jake. Without the Empire, humanity would face threats you cannot imagine. Pirates, raiders, hostile civilizations with technology that makes ours look primitive. The Empire offers safety. The price is autonomy. Maybe some people would rather take their chances with danger than give up their freedom. And many would die for that pride, Kaylara countered. I have seen it happen. Species that refused our offer, convinced they could stand alone. Some were destroyed by external threats. Others tore themselves apart with internal conflicts. The few that survived did so by becoming isolated and stagnant. Is that better than joining us? Jake wanted to argue, but he couldn't deny the logic of her words. Earth was vulnerable. Humanity had barely mastered interstellar travel. If hostile aliens appeared tomorrow, Earth would have no defense. The Empire could provide that defense, but at what cost? Your people value freedom above all else, Kaylara continued. I understand that now, thanks to you. But freedom without the power to maintain it is just an illusion waiting to be shattered. The Empire offers real security. Is that not valuable? Maybe, Jake admitted. But who decides how you use that power? What stops the Empire from becoming the very thing you claim to protect against? Kaylara smiled sadly. That is the question I ask myself every day, and I have no good answer for you. They stood in silence for a while, looking out at the stars. Jake thought about all the worlds out there, all the species living under Imperial rule. How many had made the same calculation Earth would soon face? How many had chosen security over freedom? And how many regretted that choice? Jake, Kaylara said softly, I need to tell you something. In 3 months, an Imperial delegation will travel to Earth. They will offer humanity membership in the Empire. The terms will be generous because of you, because you have shown us that humans have value beyond simple labor, but the offer will still require submission to imperial authority. Jake's heart sank. And if Earth refuses? Then they will be quarantined. No expansion beyond your current systems. No access to imperial trade routes or technology. You will be alone. You're forcing us to choose between slavery and isolation. We are offering you a choice between partnership and independence, Kalara corrected gently. I know you do not see it that way. But I am trying to give humanity the best possible outcome within the constraints of how the Empire operates. Jake turned to face her fully. Can you change those constraints? You're a princess. Someday you'll be empress. Can't you change how the Empire works? Change takes time, Kalara said. My father has ruled for 800 years. His father ruled for 900 before him. Our ways are established over millennia. I am young by our standards, and many in the court see me as too soft, too willing to consider the perspectives of conquered species. If I push too hard for change, I will be removed from succession. So you're saying nothing can change. I am saying change must be gradual. I am saying that you, Jake Morrison, have already begun that change. 6 months ago, humans were seen as barely worth noting. Now, because of you, we recognize that different species think differently, and that difference has value. That is progress, even if it feels small. Jake thought about everything he had experienced. The trial with Vraxis, the problems he had helped solve, the respect he had slowly earned from beings who had initially seen him as little more than a pet. It was progress, but was it enough? Kalara, Jake said slowly, I need to ask you something, and I need you to be completely honest with me. If I asked you to let me go home, to return to Earth before this delegation arrives, would you let me go? She was silent for a long time. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. Yes, you have earned your freedom through your service to me and to this court. If you truly wish to leave, I will not stop you. I will provide you with a ship and ensure safe passage. You could warn your people, prepare them, help them make their decision with full knowledge of what they face. But I am asking you not to go. I am asking you to stay here and help me change the Empire from within. You have accomplished more in 6 months than I have in years of arguing with the Council. Your perspective, your insights, they matter. If you leave, that progress stops. If you stay, you could help guide the Empire towards something better. It will take time, perhaps decades or centuries, but you could make a real difference. Jake closed his eyes. This was it. The choice he had known was coming since the day Kalara first claimed him. Go home and try to help Earth prepare for what was coming, or stay here and try to change the Empire itself. Both paths were important. Both paths were necessary, and he could only choose one. If I stay, Jake said finally, I need something from you. Not a promise, because I know you can't promise everything, but a commitment. That you'll listen when I tell you the Empire is wrong. That you'll keep questioning, keep pushing for better ways. That you'll remember that order and freedom don't have to be enemies. You have my commitment, Kalara said. You have always had it. That is why I chose you. Jake took a deep breath. He thought about Earth, about his family, about all the humans who had no idea what was about to change their lives forever. He thought about the workers on the colony, about Helen Martinez and everyone else he had left behind. Then he thought about the Empire, about the thousands of worlds under its control, about all the species who had no voice in how they were governed. He thought about Kalara, about the rare thing they had built together, a genuine friendship across a gulf that should have been impossible to bridge. I'll stay, Jake said, not as your claimed human, not as a curiosity or a tool. I'll stay as your advisor, your friend, and your conscience. I'll stay and help you become the empress that can actually change this empire. But you have to understand something. I'm going to challenge you. I'm going to argue with you. I'm going to push back when I think you're wrong. That's the deal, Kalara smiled.